Hey everyone, Dana here, and today I'm going to explain to you the language that we use in Pilates mat work, what that language actually means. It can actually sound like a foreign language if you haven't done Pilates mat work before, and just to help you get started to do Pilates correctly. You know, because we're using those smaller muscles, our body can often try and cheat and get these bigger muscles involved so that it makes it easier. And so when we practice Pilates mat work, if we can have correct technique, so we can do these movements, what I say, precisely, and we do these movements where we're able to flow, and we do these movements with control, we start to notice big results. But to be able to achieve those goals, we often need to understand the language of what I'm using to be able to get there. And so if you missed my first video on Pilates and what it actually does for our body as aging women, please go back and watch that, video 1. Today is purely talking the language. So in the last video, I explained to you that we have these smaller muscles that wrap around our spine, and multifidus muscles and transverse abdominis muscles, and we're trying to get them activated and strengthened, and we're trying to do that without the bigger muscles like our abdominal muscles overtaking. We don't want the big muscles to be the star of the show. We want the little muscles to be the star of the show. And this can often have us feeling like, I can't really feel anything. And so then you get worried that it's not doing anything. But it is, because when we get these little muscles nice and strong, it's going to pull those big muscles in nice and tight around your spine, which really protects your spine. It also helps you to have better posture, and it also helps reduce the risk of things like injuries and falls. Alrighty, so let's begin with a bit of language around Pilates. The idea of Pilates is eventually listening to me rather than looking at me. So if you can listen to my voice and understand the terminology, I can bring you into correct technique and keep you there as we do these different movements. So let me go through a couple of the things I talk about. One thing I'll say is find neutral spine. What does she mean by neutral spine? So when you think about, once again, we're looking at our spine, if this was laying down, you would notice there's like a natural S shape through your lower back, correct? And I want to try and achieve that natural S shape through your lower back in a lot of these movements. So let me give you an example. So when I ask you to lay down, I will often say, think about your lower back, and I want you to flatten your lower back. So when you flatten your lower back, you've engaged a lot of the big tummy muscles, but you haven't achieved neutral spine because it's not that natural S shape, is it? You've flattened it. So then I'll say to you, overarch your lower back, and so you come into what I would call a sway back. Well, that's not healthy either, because that's now putting you at risk of injury because you've totally switched these tummy muscles off. So then I'll ask you to come back halfway, and it's like you're trying to create that neutral spine that I just showed you on my spine, and it's that natural curve through your lower back, and your goal is to maintain it. I'll then ask you to activate your abdominals, and what I mean by that is draw your tummy in just a little bit towards your lower back. Now, if you suck it in as tightly as you can, once again, these bigger muscles are overtaking. So I want you just to draw it in on a scale of 0 to 100, about 30%. I'll often say, think about your pelvic floor. Imagine through the back passage, I want you to pull up internally. If you had, say, a rock out just on the outside of your back passage, I want you to internally pull that pebble up inside of you and hold that there. So you've now engaged neutral spine, you've drawn your tummy in a little bit, you've engaged your pelvic floor, and then I might say things like floating one leg to tabletop. So what I mean by that is I don't mean lift your legs and roll them down, but rather imagine you've got like a feather under one foot and you float that leg to tabletop. And what I'll often see here is I'll see women lift and lower, lift and lower. But if you can float one leg to tabletop and then engage, flatten the lower back, then float the other leg, then bring it back into neutral spine, you'll really bring your body into precision to be able to do the exercises well, yeah? Now what I call tabletop is where your knees are above your hips and your heels are an imaginary coffee table. So the mistake I see here is women drop their heels to their bottom, or what I also see is they flatten their lower back and pull their knees into their chest. So you want to make sure your knees are above your hips. You want to make sure your heels are on an imaginary coffee table. Then you start to listen to my voice when I start to say lower one heel toward the floor, and it's a movement from the hip. So what I'll see here is women will bend their knee and drop their heel, but that's not moving from the hip. Your knee is locked and you are drawing your tummy in, maintaining neutral spine. And it is all of these terminology that's going to help you to get faster results. I might also say things like ski slope. So what I mean by ski slope is you are in this position here where from your knees to your shoulders makes one long straight line, and there's no dips. So there's no dips here. You haven't dropped your bottom, but rather you've pushed your hips up, squeezing your bottom cheeks. Knees are shoulder or hip distance apart. I'll often see women flare their knees out or drop them in, but you want to keep that alignment going on. And I'll often say retract your shoulders to open up the chest, and I'll say reach your hands down towards your ankles. I'll say bring your heels close to your sit bones, and that is your bottom area here. And I'll say make sure your chin is tucked. So if you are having upper back and neck problems, you might find that your head is in this position and you're sort of looking behind you and you find it very hard to lengthen. Well, now you're putting yourself at risk of compression if you're going like this, and you can put yourself at risk of injury. So I would recommend you pop a pillow under your head until you have the mobility and the strength to have this correct posture throughout this movement. So girls, that's basically the beginning of terminology in Pilates mat work. And if you can start to practice that, remembering it's like the piano, it doesn't happen overnight. You need to practice consistently, and over time you'll start to understand the terminology. You'll start to feel the results. You'll start to feel better posture. You'll feel taller. You'll feel stronger. You'll feel toner. You'll start to visually see your body is starting to change over time. So it's not a do one time, see result type thing, yeah? Definitely worth the challenge, and over time you'll learn to love Pilates. It does work in with your breath, so you do need to learn Pilates breathing. And girls, what that is, I might as well just quickly go over that now, is when I get you to engage all this stuff down here, we do what we call lateral thoracic breathing. So I'm trying to get you to engage all this area in your abdominals, and I'm trying to get you to learn to breathe in and out of your rib cage area. So you breathe in through your nose and you feel yourself expand through the rib cage, and as you breathe out through the mouth, you feel yourself contract through the rib cage. So you breathe in, you breathe out. And then you find with Pilates, you're like, she's asking me to breathe out when I feel like I want to breathe in. Yes, correct. So Pilates works with the breath out is on the contraction of the muscle, or the more challenging piece of the exercise. And so when you feel like you're doing it opposite, you're probably doing it right. So once again, it's that listening to my voice, making sure that you're following direction correctly, and that is what will give you best results. Alrighty, reach out if you've got any questions, reach out if you need any help with programming. Remember, Pilates is one piece of our fitness program. You still need to be looking after your cardio, your strength in regard to resistance training, and also your mobility, flexibility in regard to stretching, yeah? All right, well, thanks for listening today, and I'll catch you on the Pilates mat. Take care, bye.